Alien girl drags human from a sinking skimmer, finding a relic that reacts to human. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. The skimmer's hull groaned under the pressure of the ocean depths. Ethan Walker, a seasoned explorer, gripped the edges of his seat as the craft tilted dangerously, sending a surge of cold water flooding into the cockpit. His breath quickened, his mind racing as he realized the skimmer was sinking faster than he could react. The control panels flickered, warning lights flashing red as he fought to stabilize the vehicle. His hands trembled, his strength failing him as the water rose higher. Panic began to set in, but then, through the water's murky depths, he saw her. A flash of movement, a figure cutting through the water with powerful strokes, her figure emerging from the swirling chaos. The alien girl, her skin a deep shade of turquoise, her eyes glowing with an eerie intensity, reached out toward him. In an instant, she had him by the arm, pulling him from the sinking skimmer with strength far beyond what a human could muster. Ethan's head spun as she dragged him to safety, his limbs heavy with exhaustion, the cold biting through his clothes. The world above the waterline was a blur, an endless sky, but with a sudden sharp tug, he was pulled to solid ground. She didn't speak, her focus solely on ensuring his survival, as she dragged him farther away from the wreckage. Ethan's heart hammered in his chest as he struggled to regain his breath, but then, his gaze fell on something unusual, a relic half buried in the sand, glowing faintly beneath the light of the alien sun. The object hummed softly, vibrating as if it sensed his presence. The alien girl's eyes narrowed in recognition, her expression shifting from urgency to something else. Cautiously, she released Ethan's arm and approached the relic, kneeling beside it. The relic responded to her touch, its glow intensifying. But then, it did something unexpected. The moment Ethan stepped closer, the relic's hum grew louder, and the glow shifted in his direction, as if it were drawn to him. The alien girl stood slowly, her eyes meeting his, the weight of the moment hanging between them. "You feel it too, don't you?" she asked, her voice soft, yet filled with an underlying tension. Ethan nodded, unsure of what to make of the relic's reaction. The girl, still kneeling, reached out again, this time with a mixture of curiosity and caution. "This relic," she murmured, more to herself than to Ethan, "is tied to an ancient power. And it's reacting to you." Ethan's confusion deepened. "What does that mean?" "It means," she replied, her gaze never leaving the relic, "that this is no accident. You were meant to find this." The air between them shifted as she rose, her eyes now fixed on him with a new intensity. The silence stretched, filled only by the quiet hum of the relic, as if it was waiting for something. Something that only Ethan could give. Without a word, she turned toward him, her gaze unwavering. Ethan could feel it, the weight of destiny, the pull of something larger than both of them. The adventure had only just begun. The relic pulsed softly in the alien girl's hands, its light flickering like a heartbeat as she studied it closely. Ethan, still catching his breath from the harrowing escape, stood a few feet away, unsure of what to do next. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing on him, the sand beneath his boots shifting slightly as the wind swept across the barren landscape. The alien girl's turquoise skin seemed to shimmer in the sunlight, her movements fluid and purposeful. Her glowing eyes never left the relic, and for a brief moment, Ethan could have sworn she was in another world, lost in thought. "What is it?" Ethan finally asked, his voice hoarse. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stood up, holding the relic firmly in her hands, and turned to face him. Her expression had shifted, a mix of determination and curiosity now clouding her features. "This is not just any artifact," she said, her voice low but steady. "It's a key, a piece of something much older than even my people." She paused, as if weighing her words. "And now, it's responding. To you." Ethan took a step closer, still not fully understanding what she meant. Why me? Why does it care about me? He asked, his confusion evident. She looked at him, her eyes narrowing slightly as she considered his question. I do not know, she admitted, but I feel it too. The relic, it recognizes something in you. The wind howled around them, the sound carrying across the deserted landscape, but it felt distant, as if the world around them had fallen silent. Ethan's mind raced, trying to process everything that had happened in the last few minutes. He had been saved by this mysterious alien girl, only to find himself in the middle of some ancient puzzle he didn't understand. He opened his mouth to speak but was interrupted by the sudden vibration of the relic in the girl's hands. It glowed brighter, and Ethan could feel a strange pull, an urge to step closer. The girl stiffened, her eyes widening in surprise. It's reacting again, she whispered. Before Ethan could ask what she meant, the ground beneath them trembled, and the relic hummed louder, almost as if it was alive. Arala, the alien girl, took a cautious step back, her eyes scanning the horizon. We need to move, she said urgently. This place is not safe. Not anymore. Ethan didn't need any further explanation. The relic, whatever it was, had stirred something in the earth beneath them. Without a word, they both turned and began running, the sand kicking up behind them as they moved toward the distant cliffs. Ethan's legs were still shaky from the near-death experience on the skimmer, but the adrenaline coursing through his veins pushed him forward. The girl's stride was effortless, almost graceful, her feet barely making a sound as she moved across the terrain. Ethan struggled to keep up, but her pace was unyielding. They reached the base of the cliffs in what felt like moments, but the tremors beneath them only seemed to grow stronger. Arala stopped, looking back toward the skimmer's wreckage, her eyes scanning the horizon. Something is coming, she said, her voice tense. Ethan could feel it too, a deep, rumbling vibration coming from beneath the ground. The sky above them darkened, and a strange, unnatural wind began to whip around them, carrying with it the scent of ozone. What's happening? Ethan asked, his voice rising with panic. We have to get to shelter, Arala replied quickly, grabbing his arm. Stay close to me. Ethan nodded, his heart pounding in his chest as they hurried along the cliffs, away from the growing chaos. They didn't know what was coming, but something told Ethan that the relic was at the center of it all, and somehow, he was connected to it. Whatever secrets it held, he knew he had to find out before it was too late. The ground trembled once more, and Ethan's heart skipped a beat. The deep rumbling from below had grown louder, more insistent, vibrating through the soles of his boots. Arala's face was tense as she scanned the horizon, her expression unreadable. We need to hurry, she said, her voice calm but urgent. Ethan didn't need any more convincing. He picked up his pace, following the alien girl as she led him through the winding cliffs, her every step purposeful and sure. The sand underfoot had become softer, almost spongy, as if the earth itself was reacting to the disturbances beneath them. He glanced over his shoulder, but the wreckage of the skimmer was already fading from view, swallowed by the desolate terrain. The air felt thick now, heavy with a charge that seemed to settle in his chest. He could feel something was coming, but what, exactly, he couldn't tell. Arala, however, seemed to know. They moved quickly, jumping over jagged rocks and narrow ravines as they headed towards a dark cave at the base of the cliffs. The cave's entrance was small, barely noticeable unless you knew where to look. Arala reached it first, ducking inside and holding the opening for Ethan to follow. In here, she urged, her voice firm. Ethan hesitated for only a moment before stepping into the cave. The cool air hit him like a breath of relief, but it didn't last long. The vibrations continued, sending a shiver through his spine. Inside the cave, the temperature was colder than outside, the walls slick with moisture. Arala led him deeper, moving with the ease of someone who had navigated this place before. The darkness swallowed them whole, the only light coming from the faint glow of the relic still held in Arala's hand. She walked briskly, her eyes occasionally darting back to Ethan, her expression unreadable. The cave twisted and turned, leading them to a large chamber with a high ceiling. The walls were lined with strange, glowing symbols that seemed to pulse with the same rhythm as the relic. This is where it begins, Arala said, almost to herself. She stopped at the center of the chamber, where the floor was smooth and flat. Ethan stood just behind her, still unsure of what was happening. He had questions, so many questions, but none of them seemed to matter in the face of whatever was coming. The relic in Arila's hands had grown even brighter, its hum vibrating through the very air around them. It was almost as if it was alive, reacting to the world around it, responding to something, someone else. Arila set the relic down on the stone floor, her fingers lingering on it for a moment longer before she stepped back. "We're not alone," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Ethan's pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice low. Arila's eyes narrowed, her head tilting as if listening to something just out of reach. The air seemed to thicken, the sounds of the outside world muffled as if something was pressing in on them. Ethan's breath caught in his throat as he realized what she meant. It wasn't just the relic. There was something else, something moving beneath them. The vibrations had stopped, replaced by a strange silence, as if the world was holding its breath. The glow of the relic grew, casting long, eerie shadows across the walls of the cave. Then, from the darkness beyond, came a sound. A low, guttural growl that sent a chill down Ethan's spine. It was close. Too close. Arila stepped forward, her posture rigid with tension. "Stay behind me," she instructed, her voice no longer calm. "Whatever happens, do not move unless I tell you." Ethan's heart raced, his pulse hammering in his chest. He didn't know what they were about to face, but one thing was certain, whatever it wasn't something he could handle alone. He nodded, taking a step back, trying to make himself as small as possible in the face of whatever danger was coming their way. Arila's eyes glowed brightly in the darkness as she prepared herself for whatever was emerging from the shadows. Ethan could only watch as the sound grew louder, and from the depths of the cave, something moved toward them, slowly, deliberately, with a power that shook the ground beneath their feet. The growl echoed through the cave, deep and resonant, vibrating the stone walls. Ethan's breath hitched in his throat, the air suddenly feeling thick and heavy, as if the very atmosphere was pressing in on them. Arila remained perfectly still, her posture tense, every muscle coiled, her glowing eyes locked on the darkness ahead. Ethan, unable to move, could only wait, his heart hammering in his chest. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and the growl grew louder, more distinct. Something was out there, and it was closing in. Arila took a slow, deliberate step forward, her eye scanning the shadows. She didn't look back at Ethan, but he could sense the calm determination in her. She was ready. Ethan wanted to ask what was coming, but the words caught in his throat. He had no idea what they were facing, but the way Arila stood, so composed, made him feel like this wasn't her first time dealing with whatever it was. The sound came again, sharper this time, followed by a soft scrape, like claws dragging across stone. The darkness in front of them seemed to pulse, the shadows thickening, as if something was moving within them, unseen. Arila stepped forward again, closer to the edge of the chamber. Her hand, still holding the relic, raised slightly, the faint glow from it illuminating her face in a soft, eerie light. Ethan couldn't take his eyes off her. She was so confident, so in control, and it made him realize just how out of place he felt in this alien world. He had never been in a situation like this, had never encountered anything like her, yet here he was, standing next to her, waiting for whatever came next. The scraping sound stopped. The silence that followed was deafening, and for a moment, Ethan thought he might go mad from the anticipation. Then, from the shadows, a pair of glowing eyes appeared, watching them intently. Ethan's breath caught in his chest as the figure stepped into the faint light. It was tall, its form hulking, with a sleek, dark exoskeleton that shimmered under the light from the relic. Its claws, sharp and elongated, clicked against the stone floor as it moved toward them, each step deliberate, cautious, like it was studying them. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. It wasn't human, but it wasn't like anything he had seen in his wildest imaginations. The creature's eyes, a deep, almost unnatural green, flickered between Arila and Ethan, and for a long moment, it did nothing but watch. Arila didn't flinch. She stood her ground, the relic still glowing faintly in her hand. The creature's gaze finally settled on her, its growl softer now, almost questioning. Then, in a sudden motion, it dropped to one knee before her, its head bowing in what could only be described as reverence. Ethan's jaw went slack. He had no idea what was happening. Was it showing respect? Was it a threat? Aralar, however, didn't seem surprised. She watched the creature with a steady gaze, her posture relaxing slightly. She spoke to it in a language Ethan didn't understand, her words soft but commanding. The creature responded in kind, its voice deep and guttural, but there was no malice in it. Ethan, still frozen in place, could only watch as the two communicated, the air between them thick with tension but also something else. Respect. Understanding. The creature, after a long moment, stood back up, its eyes still locked on Aralar. It stepped aside, making way for them, as if giving them passage. Aralar nodded once, a silent acknowledgement, before turning back to Ethan. "Come," she said simply, her voice steady. "It's safe now." Ethan blinked, his mind racing to catch up with everything that had just happened. He didn't understand any of it, but somehow, he trusted her. He took a tentative step forward, still keeping a careful distance from the creature. Aralar led the way, her movements fluid and confident. As they passed the creature, it didn't move, only watching them silently. Ethan couldn't help but glance at it one last time before he followed Aralar deeper into the cave. What was going on here? What had just happened? He had so many questions, but all he could do now was follow her and hope that, somehow, he would get the answers he needed. They continued deeper into the cave, the strange, glowing symbols on the walls casting an eerie light that flickered with each step they took. The air was thick with the scent of earth and something ancient, as if the very stones around them held secrets long forgotten. Ethan followed Aralar closely, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He had no idea what was happening, or what this place was, but the feeling of being on the edge of something monumental was undeniable. The relic's faint glow in Aralar's hand seemed to guide them, responding to the vibrations beneath their feet. The creature, the one that had bowed to Aralar, had remained where it was, watching them silently as they moved away. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched by more than just that creature. The cave seemed alive, alive with history, with something greater than he could understand. As they reached the end of the winding passage, they arrived at a large, open chamber. The ceiling above them soared high, lost in the shadows, and in the center of the room stood a pedestal made of the same smooth, dark stone as the walls. On top of the pedestal rested another relic, even older than the one Aralar held, its surface covered in intricate patterns that pulsed with the same faint glow. Aralar stepped forward, her eyes fixed on the relic. She moved with purpose, her steps sure and confident, yet there was a tension in her posture, a silent acknowledgement that this was the moment they had been preparing for. Ethan watched, his heart pounding in his chest. "This is it," Aralar said quietly, almost to herself. "This is where it all begins." She placed the first relic on the pedestal, her fingers brushing against the ancient stone as she did so. For a long moment, nothing happened. The chamber was still, the air thick with anticipation. Then, a low hum began to fill the space. It was barely audible at first, but it grew louder, the sound vibrating through the ground beneath their feet. Ethan's eyes widened as the relics began to glow brighter, the patterns on their surfaces shifting, moving like they were alive. The glow from both relics intensified, their light intertwining, creating a strange, pulsing rhythm that seemed to resonate with something deep inside Ethan. He stepped closer, drawn to the energy. The humming became a steady, rhythmic beat, like the pulse of a heart, and Ethan could feel it now, thrumming in his chest, in his very bones. Aralar turned to him, her face illuminated by the glow of the relics. "It's calling to you," she said, her voice steady but tinged with awe. This is why it reacted to you. You're connected to it." Ethan looked at her, his mind racing. "What does that mean?" "I don't know," she admitted, her eyes still on the relics. "But I believe you were meant to find this. And now that it's awakened, there is no turning back." The chamber seemed to grow colder, the air around them thickening as the relics continued to pulse. Ethan's thoughts were spinning. He had come here by accident, or so he thought, but now, standing in this ancient chamber, he couldn't help but feel like he was part of something much bigger than himself. He reached out, his hand trembling slightly as he approached the pedestal. The moment his fingers brushed against the second relic, the ground beneath them shook again, more violently this time, sending a wave of dust and debris through the chamber. Arila's eyes flashed with concern. "We need to leave, now," she shouted, grabbing Ethan's arm and pulling him back. But it was too late. The cave trembled, and a low rumbling sound echoed through the walls, growing louder with each passing second. The relic's glow intensified to a blinding light, and Ethan could feel the energy swirling around him, wrapping around him like a force he couldn't control. Arila pulled him toward the exit, but the path they had come from was now blocked, rubble falling from the ceiling, sealing their only escape. "We're trapped," Arila said, her voice tight with panic. Ethan's heart raced as he looked around, his mind racing. The ground shook again, stronger this time, and a deep voice, older than anything he had ever heard, reverberated through the chamber, filling the air. "You have awakened what should remain asleep," the voice boomed, sending chills down Ethan's spine. "And now, you must face the consequences." The light from the relics flared, blinding Ethan, and for a moment, everything went black. The blinding light from the relics faded slowly, and Ethan blinked against the sudden darkness that followed. His ears were ringing, the rumbling in the cave still vibrating through the walls, but the air had become strangely still. He tried to move, but his legs felt heavy, as if the very weight of the moment was pressing down on him. Arila's grip on his arm tightened, pulling him to his feet as she looked around frantically. "Stay close," she urged, her voice filled with urgency. Ethan nodded, though. His mind was racing. What had just happened? What was that voice? And why had the relics reacted so violently? He could feel the ground beneath him shifting, the tremors not subsiding but instead growing stronger. Arila led him forward, her steps steady but quick. "We need to find another way out," she said, her voice firm. "This place isn't safe anymore." Ethan tried to focus, his thoughts still clouded by the overwhelming events. "What was that voice?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "The voice," Arila began, her eyes scanning the dark cave, "belongs to the Guardians. They are the protectors of the relics, ancient beings that have kept them hidden for millennia." Ethan's brow furrowed. "Guardians? Why didn't you tell me about them before?" Arila's gaze softened slightly. "I didn't think we would awaken them," she said, her voice quieter now. "The relics have a way of choosing when and how they reveal their power. It seems they've chosen you." Ethan's mind spun as he processed her words. He had never asked to be part of any ancient prophecy or battle for a relic's power. He was just an ordinary man, thrown into something far beyond his understanding. "So, what now?" he asked, his voice tight with confusion and frustration. Arila's expression hardened once more as she turned back to the path ahead. "Now, we survive," she said simply. "And we learn what the relics want from you." As they continued moving deeper into the cave, Ethan could feel the pull of the relics, as if they were calling to him, urging him to understand their secrets. The air around them seemed to hum, and he couldn't shake the feeling that the cave itself was alive, watching them. They came upon another opening, a large chamber that stretched before them, its vastness swallowed by shadows. The glow of the relics lit the space ahead, revealing strange carvings along the walls, symbols that Ethan couldn't make sense of. Arila stepped forward cautiously, her hand resting on the hilt of her blade, her eyes scanning the room. "We must be careful," she murmured. "The Guardians will not let us pass without a test." Ethan's heart quickened. "A test? What kind of test?" "A test of worth," Arila replied. "The relics will decide if you are ready to wield their power. If you are not, they will not hesitate to take it back." Ethan's thoughts raced as he tried to make sense of what she was saying. The relics had reacted to him, yes, but he didn't feel ready for any test, especially not one that involved ancient guardians and unknown powers. "And if I fail?" he asked, his voice shaky. Arila turned to face him, her expression serious. Then we both fail, she said simply. The weight of her words hung in the air, heavy and unspoken. Ethan didn't know what to expect, but he could feel the stakes rising with every step they took deeper into the chamber. The ground beneath them seemed to vibrate once more, and the symbols on the walls began to glow brighter. Ethan felt the pull again, stronger now, as if the relics were trying to communicate with him, to tell him something he wasn't quite able to understand. Then, without warning, the chamber's vast silence was broken by the sound of stone grinding against stone. The floor before them shifted, revealing a large, stone platform. The glow from the relics flickered, casting long shadows across the room. Aralar stepped forward, motioning for Ethan to follow. "This is it," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Ethan took a deep breath and stepped onto the platform, the light from the relics surrounding him. He felt the air change, becoming charged with energy, as if the very fabric of the cave was shifting around them. The Guardians were watching. And this was their test. The platform beneath Ethan's feet began to hum, the vibration seeping into his bones. The light from the relics intensified, casting long, shifting shadows across the chamber. He stood at the center of the stone platform, feeling both the weight of the moment and an unfamiliar pull, a connection to something ancient and powerful. Aralar stood just behind him, her posture tense, her eyes scanning the chamber for any sign of movement. "This is where you prove yourself," she said quietly, almost as if to herself. Ethan could feel her gaze, but it was the energy in the air that held his attention. The relics, still glowing with an ethereal light, seemed to react to his presence, their hum growing louder. The symbols on the walls flickered, their patterns shifting and changing as if the cave itself were alive, responding to the relic's power. Ethan swallowed hard, his heart pounding in his chest. He had no idea what he was supposed to do, but the feeling of being watched, studied, by forces far beyond his comprehension was undeniable. "What do I do?" he asked, his voice rough with uncertainty. Aralar didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stepped forward, her eyes never leaving the relics. "You must focus," she said. "The relics are linked to you now, and they will test your worth. Trust in them, trust in yourself." Ethan looked at her, trying to make sense of her words, but there was no time to question further. The glow from the relics suddenly flared, and a surge of energy shot through the chamber. The platform beneath him trembled as if it were awakening, the stones shifting under his feet. The room grew brighter, the symbols on the walls glowing with an almost blinding intensity. Ethan staggered slightly, but Aralar's hand shot out, steadying him. "Don't resist," she urged. "Let it in. Feel the connection." Ethan hesitated for a moment, then closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. He felt it then, the pulse, deep within him, a rhythmic thrum that seemed to match the beat of his own heart. The relics were calling to him, and with that realization, he could no longer deny the strange connection he felt. It wasn't just the relics that reacted to him. Something inside him was awakening too, something buried deep in his mind. He reached out, his fingers brushing the surface of the relics. As his skin made contact, a surge of warmth flooded through him. His mind was flooded with images, visions of distant places, ancient battles, and forgotten histories. He saw worlds and civilizations rise and fall in flashes, their stories imprinted upon the very fabric of the relics. It was overwhelming, too much to process, but there was something in the chaos that called to him. Something that made him realize he was part of something far greater. "Focus," Aralar's voice pierced through the whirlwind of images. "Focus on your purpose. You were meant to carry this power." Ethan's mind cleared for a moment, and in that stillness, he felt it, a quiet certainty that had been growing within him. The relics were not just objects of power, they were keys, unlocking something dormant inside him. He could feel it now, pulsing in his chest. He wasn't just a bystander in this ancient game. He was meant to play a role. The energy around him began to settle, the glow from the relics dimming slightly, as if the test had ended. Ethan's fingers still rested on the relics, his connection to them lingering, the echoes of the visions fading into a soft hum. He opened his eyes and looked around. The chamber, once alive with energy, now seemed still, the hum of the relics the only sound. Aralar stood a few feet away, watching him closely. "You've passed the test," she said, her voice filled with something akin to respect. Ethan nodded, but his mind was still racing. What does that mean? What happens now? Aralar's gaze softened, but her tone remained serious. Now, you will learn what it truly means to wield this power. And you will have to face what is coming, because the relics have chosen you. And with that choice comes responsibility. Ethan's thoughts were a blur. He had no idea what lay ahead, but he knew one thing for sure: his life had changed forever. Whatever this power was, whatever role he was meant to play, he couldn't turn back now. The relics had awakened something inside him, and now, there was no going back. The silence in the chamber was almost suffocating. Ethan stood there, still processing everything that had just happened. The relics had chosen him, and now he was part of something far bigger than he could ever have imagined. Aralar's eyes, still watching him closely, softened slightly as she stepped toward him. "You have felt it, haven't you?" she asked, her voice quiet but firm. Ethan nodded, though he wasn't entirely sure what she meant. "The connection," she continued, "the power that the relics have awakened inside you. It is not just a physical power, but one that connects you to everything, past, present, and future." Ethan's head spun with the weight of her words. He had felt it, the surge of energy when he touched the relics, but understanding it was something else entirely. "What am I supposed to do with it?" he asked, his voice heavy with uncertainty. Aralar paused for a moment, her gaze drifting toward the relics resting on the pedestal, their glow dimming, as if in response to the question. "That," she said slowly, "is something you will have to discover for yourself. The relics will guide you, but you must be ready to listen. And there will be those who seek to take them from you, who will stop at nothing to gain their power." The words hung in the air, and Ethan felt a chill run through him. He hadn't signed up for any of this. He had only come here by accident, only to find himself caught in an ancient conflict. "Why me?" he whispered. "Why did they choose me?" Aralar met his gaze, her expression unreadable. "The relics do not choose lightly," she said. "You are more than just a man. You have a purpose, though you may not fully understand it yet. The power you now possess is not meant to be wielded lightly. It is a gift and a curse." Ethan didn't know how to respond. He had no idea what this power even was, and the thought of facing enemies who would stop at nothing to get their hands on it was overwhelming. He looked around the chamber, the flickering glow of the relics casting long shadows on the walls. "How do I learn to control it?" he asked. Aralar smiled faintly. "Patience," she said. "And time. The relics will teach you, but you must be open to learning. And trust in yourself." Ethan took a deep breath, trying to steady his thoughts. Trust in himself. It was easier said than done. He had spent his life avoiding responsibility, staying under the radar, but now it seemed that he had no choice but to face whatever destiny had in store for him. "We must leave," Aralar said, breaking his thoughts. "The longer we stay here, the more danger we're in. The Guardians will not wait long to make their move." Ethan nodded, his mind still racing, but he knew she was right. They couldn't afford to stay in one place for too long. With one last look at the relics, he followed Aralar as she led the way out of the chamber. The narrow tunnel ahead was dark, but the faint glow from the relics still illuminated their path. The weight of the situation was pressing on him with every step. He had no idea what the future held, but he knew that the relics had set him on a path that couldn't be undone. As they moved deeper into the cave, the sound of distant rumbling reached his ears, a reminder that whatever power lay ahead, there was no going back now. The narrow tunnel stretched out ahead, its walls growing tighter as Ethan and Aralar moved deeper into the cave. The air felt cooler here, and the faint glow from the relics was the only light guiding their way. The sound of distant rumbling still echoed through the chamber, a constant reminder that whatever force had been awakened was far from finished. Ethan's mind raced with questions, but the weight of the situation kept his thoughts focused. They couldn't afford to stop, couldn't afford to hesitate. As they walked, Aralar's pace never faltered, her eyes scanning the path ahead with the precision of someone who had spent years navigating these caverns. Ethan tried to match her pace, but his mind kept returning to the relics, to the strange connection he felt. "What happens if they come after us?" Ethan asked, his voice low but filled with urgency. Arila's expression was unreadable as she glanced over her shoulder. "They will," she said simply. "The Guardians will not let us leave easily. But we can't let them stop us. We have a mission now." Ethan swallowed hard. He didn't fully understand what that mission was, but the way Arila spoke, with such certainty, made him feel like there was no room for doubt. "What are the Guardians?" he asked, the question burning in his mind. Arila's gaze softened for a moment. "They are ancient beings, protectors of the relics. They've been guarding them for millennia, making sure they don't fall into the wrong hands. But now that the relics have chosen you, they will see you as a threat." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. "But I didn't ask for this," he said, his voice strained. "I didn't even know the relics existed until I stumbled into all of this." Arila nodded, her expression hardening once more. "It doesn't matter. The relics have chosen you, and now you must protect them. If you don't, they will fall into the hands of those who would use them for far darker purposes." The gravity of her words settled over him like a weight he couldn't shake. He had no choice. Whether he wanted this responsibility or not, it was now his to bear. They reached a small opening in the tunnel, and Arila paused, holding up her hand for silence. Ethan stopped beside her, his breath shallow as he listened. The rumbling had stopped, replaced by an eerie silence that stretched on far too long. Arila's sharp eyes scanned the darkness, and then, without warning, she stepped forward, moving quickly and silently. Ethan followed her, his steps unsure but driven by the need to keep up. The path ahead opened up into a wide cavern, far larger than any of the tunnels they had passed through. The floor was uneven, littered with jagged rocks and deep crevices. The air here was thick, charged with an energy that seemed to hum through the walls. In the center of the cavern stood another pedestal, this one taller, made of the same dark stone as the relics. It was empty. Arila moved forward, her eyes scanning the room with practiced precision. "This is where the final test will take place," she said quietly. Ethan's stomach tightened. "The final test?" Arila nodded. "The relics will require you to prove yourself. Only when you have completed the test will you truly understand your purpose." "What kind of test?" Ethan asked, his voice shaky. Arila met his gaze, her eyes unblinking. "A test of strength, of will. You will face your fears, your doubts, and the true power of the relics. Only then will you be ready to wield what they offer." Ethan took a step back, his heart pounding in his chest. He had no idea what was coming, but the weight of Arila's words hung heavily over him. He wasn't sure he was ready for any of this. But there was no turning back now. He stepped forward, his feet heavy as he crossed into the center of the cavern. The air grew thicker, the hum of energy in the walls vibrating through his body. The pedestal glowed faintly, and Ethan felt an almost magnetic pull toward it. As his hand reached out to touch the stone, a sharp, electric jolt shot through him, causing him to gasp. The light from the pedestal flared, and Ethan's world was suddenly filled with a blinding light. In an instant, everything around him seemed to vanish, and he was surrounded by darkness. His breath quickened, and the hum of the relics in his chest grew louder, almost deafening. And then, from the darkness, came a voice. It was deep, echoing through his mind like a distant thunderclap. "Do you understand now?" the voice asked, its tone heavy and knowing. Ethan's heart raced as he tried to focus on the voice, but the darkness around him seemed to shift, taking shape. Shadows moved, forming into images of people he knew, people he feared. His past, his doubts, his regrets, all of it pressed in on him at once. The voice came again, this time closer, more forceful. "Do you accept the power that comes with the relics?" Ethan's chest tightened as he tried to speak, but no words came out. The shadows surrounded him, and for a moment, he felt as if he were drowning in them. and then, just as suddenly as it had begun, everything stopped. The cavern was silent again. The relics on the pedestal hummed quietly, and Ethan stood there, his body trembling. He had passed the test, but at what cost?